Abducted from the void. The mining rig creaked and groaned as Jace Torres guided it through the asteroid belt. Out here, in the farthest reaches of human territory, the silence was absolute except for the occasional ping of the radar and the hum of life support systems. Jace preferred it this way. After 15 years in deep space mining, human interaction had become something of a chore. Jackpot, he whispered, spotting a particularly promising asteroid on his scanner. Rich in rare earth metals, it would fetch a pretty penny back at the trading post. Enough to keep him in supplies for another 6 months of blessed solitude. The tractor beam locked onto the rock, slowly pulling it toward the processing bay of his ship, the Wanderer. Jace leaned back in his chair, feet up on the console, watching the stars. That's when he noticed it, a shimmer in space, like heat rising from asphalt. Something was wrong. Before he could react, a massive ship emerged from what appeared to be a fold in reality itself. It dwarfed his mining vessel, its sleek purple-black hull adorned with what looked like crystalline growths. Definitely not human design. Unidentified vessel, Jace broadcast, trying to keep his voice steady. This is independent mining vessel Wanderer. You're in human territory. No response came through his comms. Instead, a beam of emerald light shot out from the alien ship, enveloping the Wanderer. The mining rig systems went dead, plunging Jace into darkness as the artificial gravity failed. He floated helplessly in his pilot's chair, watching as the massive ship grew larger in his viewport. Well, shit, he muttered, reaching for the emergency beacon. His fingers never made it to the button. The world dissolved around him in a flash of green light. Jace awoke to the sensation of being watched. He kept his eyes closed, assessing his situation. He was lying on something cool and smooth, not uncomfortable but definitely not his bunk on the Wanderer. The air smelled different too, like ozone and something floral he couldn't place. I know you're awake, human. The voice was female, rich and melodic, but with an unsettling harmonic underneath that no human throat could produce. Jace opened his eyes. He was in a vast chamber, its walls a shifting panorama of stars and nebulae, giving the unsettling impression of floating in space. The floor beneath him was some sort of black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Standing over him was the most striking being he'd ever seen. She, if she was the right pronoun, stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin the color of twilight that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Her eyes were pure silver, without iris or pupil, and her head was crowned with what looked like crystalline growths similar to those on the ship, arranged in patterns too perfect to be natural. Where am I? Jace asked, sitting up slowly. And who are you? A smile curved her purple lips. You are aboard my flagship, the Void Dancer. And I am Empress Nyx of the Zalari Empire. She tilted her head, studying him like a curious specimen. And you are the first human to enter our space in over a century. Jace frowned. Your space. I was in the Kuiper Belt. That's human territory. Nyx laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Your species is so charmingly provincial. The territories you claim are but specks in our empire. She gestured, and the walls changed to show a map of the galaxy, with a vast section illuminated in pulsing purple light. This is the Zalari Empire. Your Earth is here. A tiny blue dot appeared on the edge of the purple expanse. Why am I here? Jace asked, trying to process the scale of what he was seeing. Curiosity, Nyx replied simply. It has been so long since we've encountered one of your kind. The last human in our court died decades ago, and I find myself curious about your species' evolution since then. The casual way she mentioned the death of another human sent a chill down Jace's spine. I'm not a lab specimen. No, Nyx agreed, her silver eyes glinting. You're my new pet. Before Jace could respond, 2 guards entered the chamber. They were similar to Nyx in height and coloring, but their crystalline growths were arranged differently, and they wore armor that seemed to be made of the same light-absorbing material as the floor. "Take him to the preparation chambers," Nyx ordered. "He smells of metal and human filth. Make him presentable for court tomorrow." The guard seized Jace by the arms. He struggled briefly, but their grip was like iron. "You can't do this," he protested. "I'm a citizen of the Solar Alliance." Nyx's smile was cold. "I am Empress of 1,000 worlds, human. I can do whatever I please." The preparation was thorough and humiliating. Alien attendants, smaller than the guards, with 4 arms and skin ranging from pale blue to deep indigo, stripped him, bathed him in scented oils, and dressed him in flowing garments of a material that felt like liquid silver against his skin. Throughout it all, he noticed a small hovering device recording everything. When he tried to swat it away, one of the attendants hissed a warning. "The Empress watches," the alien said in accented English. "Always." After the preparation, Jace was taken to what appeared to be living quarters, luxurious by human standards, with a bed large enough for 3 people, food and drink dispensers, and a viewport showing an alien cityscape below. The architecture was all sweeping curves and crystalline structures that caught the light of a large purple sun, sending rainbow refractions across the landscape. Beautiful, but still a prison. The door had no visible lock or handle, and when Jace approached it, a force field activated with a warning hum. He spent hours testing his enclosure, looking for weaknesses, all too aware of the hovering recorder tracking his every move. Finally, exhausted, he sat on the edge of the enormous bed. "Why me?" he asked the empty room, knowing Nyx was probably watching. "There are billions of humans. Why take a solitary miner?" To his surprise, a holographic projection of the Empress appeared before him. "Because you were alone," Nyx answered, her image shimmering slightly. "No one to miss you. No immediate search party. And because you've spent years isolated among the stars. You're already halfway to understanding our perspective." "Which is what, exactly?" "That the universe is vast and cold, and power is the only true currency." The hologram moved closer, studying him. "Your species is young, but resilient. Adaptable. I'm curious to see how you adapt to our court." "I won't be your pet," Jace said firmly. Nyx's laugh echoed through the room. "You misunderstand, human. In the Zalari court, being my pet puts you under my protection. And you'll need it." Her silver eyes narrowed. "The court can be deadly to those who don't understand its rules. And if I refuse to play along, then you'll die," she said simply. "After we've extracted everything of interest from your mind and body, of course. We waste nothing in the Empire." The hologram flickered. "Rest now, Jace Torres. Tomorrow you'll be presented to the court, and your new life begins." Her image leaned closer, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw something like genuine curiosity in those alien eyes. "I have high hopes for you. Don't disappoint me." The projection vanished, leaving Jace alone with his thoughts and the distant purple sun setting over an alien horizon. He lay back on the bed, mind racing. The Zalari Empire, a galactic power humans knew nothing about. An empress who collected specimens from lesser species. A deadly court where he was to be paraded as the latest exotic pet. Adapt or die, he murmured to himself. Those were the rules of deep space mining too. Identify the threat, assess resources, find a way to survive. For now, he would play along. Learn the rules of this alien court. Find weaknesses. And eventually, find a way home. But as sleep finally claimed him, one thought lingered, the way Nyx had looked at him, with that predatory curiosity. She wanted something from him beyond simple entertainment. Whispers among the stars. The gardens of Celestial Prime floated among the clouds, suspended platforms filled with otherworldly flora that shimmered and pulsed with their own inner light. Astra walked along the crystalline paths, marveling at flowers that seemed to sing and plants that danced in invisible winds. A week into her stay, and the Solarian capital still took her breath away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Prince Talon's voice startled her. He stood near a cluster of luminescent blooms, his tall frame wrapped in robes that rippled like liquid starlight. "These gardens have been here since the founding of our empire." Astra nodded, trying to maintain her diplomatic composure despite the way her pulse quickened at his presence. Their formal meetings had been strictly professional, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made her wonder if he felt the same inexplicable draw. "The botanical team on Earth would love to study these specimens," she said, gesturing to a flower that emitted soft pulses of blue light. "The applications for sustainable energy alone are precisely what concerns certain members of the court," Talon interrupted gently. "Not everyone shares my father's vision of open exchange between our peoples." As if summoned by his words, voices drifted from a nearby path. Astra recognized High Counselor Nexus, one of the most vocal opponents of human-Solarian relations. "The human presence threatens everything we've built," Nexus was saying. "They're barely out of their planetary cradle, and we're sharing our most sacred technologies." Talon drew Astra behind a towering crystal formation, his hand warm against her arm. They listened as Nexus and his companions passed. "The prophecy speaks of change," another voice argued. "Perhaps this is what was foretold." "Prophecies can be misinterpreted," Nexus snapped. "And some changes must be prevented, at any cost." Once they were gone, Astra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That sounded like a threat. It was, Talon confirmed, his golden eyes troubled. "The opposition grows stronger each day. They fear what closer ties with Earth might mean for our society." "We have similar concerns on Earth," Astra admitted. "Some believe we're moving too fast, that we're not ready for this level of advanced technology." Talon's hand was still on her arm, his touch sending warmth through her diplomatic uniform. "And what do you believe, Ambassador?" She met his gaze. "I believe that fear of change shouldn't stop us from embracing the future." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "You continue to surprise me, Astra Novak." Before she could respond, a chime sounded through the gardens, the call to council. Talon stepped back, and Astra immediately missed his warmth. "The morning session awaits," he said formally, though his eyes held something more personal. "Shall we?" The council chamber was a marvel of Solarian architecture, its dome open to the golden sky above. Astra took her place among the diplomatic corps, aware of the whispers that followed her. News of her encounter with Nexus would spread quickly in a court where gossip traveled faster than light. The session began with routine matters, trade agreements, cultural exchange protocols, the establishment of Earth's first embassy on Celestial Prime. But when Astra rose to present her latest proposal, she felt the undercurrent of tension. "The joint research initiative would benefit both our peoples," she explained, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Earth's innovative approaches combined with Solarian technology could lead to breakthroughs in medicine, clean energy and weapons." Nexus interrupted smoothly. "Shall we share our defense systems as well? Our planetary shields? The very technologies that keep our empire safe?" "That's not what The human ambassador speaks of cooperation," Nexus continued, addressing the council, "but history shows us that younger civilizations often mistake guidance for weakness. How long before they demand more than we're willing to give?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Astra gripped the podium, fighting to maintain her composure. "If I may respond A sudden tremor shook the building, cutting off her words. The golden sky above darkened as energy readings spiked across all monitors. In the confusion, Astra caught glimpses of fear on faces both human and Solarian. "The planetary shields," someone shouted. "They're malfunctioning." Astra rushed to the nearest console, her fingers flying over the crystalline controls. To everyone's surprise, including her own, the alien technology responded to her touch. Streams of data flowed through her mind as if she'd worked with these systems her entire life. There, she muttered, isolating the problem. The power distribution is destabilized. If we reroute through the secondary grid dash. Her hands moved instinctively, and the shield stabilized. The sky cleared, returning to its normal golden hue. In the stunned silence that followed, she became aware of every eye in the chamber fixed on her. Impossible, Nexus breathed. No outsider has ever operated our systems with such intuition. Talon stepped forward, his expression a mix of wonder and concern. How did you do that? Astra stared at her hands, then at the console. I don't know. It was as if the technology spoke to me. The whispers grew louder. She caught fragments of conversation, the prophecy, signs, awakening. Even Nexus seemed shaken, his earlier hostility replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Later, in the privacy of her quarters, Astra paced restlessly. The day's events played through her mind, the political tensions, the mysterious malfunction, her unprecedented connection to Solarian technology. Something was happening, something beyond diplomatic relations and cultural exchange. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Talon, still in his formal robes but with his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in thought. The council is in an uproar, he said without preamble. What you did today, it shouldn't have been possible. I know. Astra sank into a chair. I can't explain it. Ever since I arrived, I've felt this connection. Not just to the technology, but to everything here. Like I've come home to a place I've never been. Talon moved closer, his presence both comforting and electrifying. There are ancient texts that speak of a time when humans and Solarians were more than just distant civilizations. But those records are fragmented, sealed away in the deep archives. What are you saying? I'm saying, he knelt before her, taking her hands in his, that perhaps your arrival here isn't just about diplomacy. Perhaps it's about awakening something that both our peoples have forgotten. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Astra felt the weight of destiny settling around them. Whatever was happening, whatever forces had brought them together, there would be no turning back. In the golden city above the clouds, as two hearts beat in sync with ancient rhythms, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what would come next. The cosmic dance. The great hall of the Solarian archives hummed with ancient energy as Astra ran her fingers along the crystalline shelves. The massive chamber stretched endlessly upward, its walls lined with data crystals containing millennia of Solarian knowledge. But it was the artifacts that drew her attention, relics from an age when the Solarians first reached for the stars. They've never responded to an outsider before, the archive keeper, Sentinel Verix, observed quietly. His silver eyes tracked her movements as she approached a particularly old piece, a navigation sphere that hadn't functioned in centuries. The moment Astra's fingers touched its surface, the sphere illuminated, golden light spiraling outward in intricate patterns. Star maps and coordinates long thought lost projected into the air around them. Verix inhaled sharply. Impossible, he whispered. Astra withdrew her hand, and the light faded. Has this happened with all the artifacts I've touched? Every single one. Verix's expression was unreadable. The High Council must be informed. Word spread quickly through the crystalline corridors of Celestial Prime. The human ambassador had awakened ancient Solarian technology. Some whispered it was a sign, others a threat. Prince Talon found her later that evening on one of the floating meditation platforms, watching the triple moons rise. The council is in an uproar, he said, settling beside her. Half of them believe you're the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The other half want you confined for study. Astra smiled wryly. And what do you believe? His golden eyes met hers. I believe you're exactly where you're meant to be. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Since that first day in the gardens, their encounters had grown more frequent, their conversations deeper. She found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his vision for his people's future. And sometimes, when he looked at her like this, she wondered if he felt the same pull. "The opposition is growing stronger," she said quietly. "Not everyone wants our peoples to come together." The stellar purists, Talon nodded. "They believe mixing with other species will dilute our essence. They're gathering supporters among the noble houses. On Earth too. The Isolation Party gains more followers every day. They think we're moving too fast, that we should focus on our own development before reaching for the stars." A comfortable silence fell between them. Below, the city gleamed like captured starlight, bridges of pure energy connecting floating platforms and crystalline spires. Somewhere in those depths, forces worked to tear apart everything they'd built. "There's something else," Talon said finally. "The artifacts you've awakened, they're showing us things. Star maps, coordinates, histories we thought lost forever. And they all point to one thing: Earth and Solaria have met before." Astra's breath caught. "What?" "Thousands of years ago, our civilizations weren't just aware of each other, they were allies. Something happened, something that made both sides choose to forget. The records are fragmentary, but they speak of a threat so great it required both our peoples to face it together. And now the artifacts are awakening," Astra murmured. "Just as our peoples reconnect. The timing cannot be coincidence." Talon's hand found hers in the darkness. "Whatever happened then, whatever forced our ancestors apart, I believe it's returning." A shiver ran down Astra's spine. "We need to know more. If there really is a connection between Earth and Solaria dash." "The purists can't know," Talon interrupted. "If they discover evidence of past cooperation between our peoples, they'll destroy it. They've already tried to access the archives. Then we'll have to find answers another way." Astra squeezed his hand. "The diplomatic summit is in 3 days. Every noble house will be there, including the purist leaders. While they're distracted, we can search the deep archives," Talon finished. "It's dangerous. If we're caught dash. I'm already breaking protocol just by being here with you," she smiled. "What's one more risk?" He laughed softly, and the sound sent warmth through her chest. They sat together as the moons climbed higher, their joined hands a bridge between worlds. Neither spoke of the growing tension between them, the way their bodies gravitated closer, the electricity that sparked when their eyes met. Some things were better left unspoken, especially when duty and destiny pulled in opposite directions. The summit arrived in a flurry of ceremony. The great hall of Celestial Prime filled with representatives from both worlds, Solarian nobles in their flowing robes, human diplomats in formal attire. Astra stood on the speaking platform, addressing the gathered crowd about the progress of their cultural exchange. She was halfway through her speech when the first explosion rocked the building. Chaos erupted immediately. Guards rushed to protect the dignitaries as smoke filled the hall. Through the confusion, Astra caught glimpses of masked figures moving with purpose. Not random terrorists, trained soldiers. "The archives," she gasped, realizing their true target. With everyone gathered at the summit, the ancient artifacts would be virtually unguarded. She slipped away from her security detail, running through familiar corridors. Behind her, she heard Talon calling her name, but there was no time. If the purists reached the artifacts first, thousands of years of history would be lost forever. The archive doors had been blown open. Inside, she found 3 figures in black, gathering artifacts into quantum storage containers. One of them held the navigation sphere she'd awakened. "Stop," she commanded, letting her diplomat's mask fall away to reveal the steel beneath. They turned, weapons raising. Astra didn't hesitate. Her combat training kicked in as she moved, faster than they expected a human to be. The first attacker went down before he could fire, her strike precise and devastating. The second managed to get off a shot that grazed her shoulder before Talon appeared, his own fighting skills honed by years of royal training. Together, they made short work of the intruders. As palace guards flooded in to secure the scene, Astra knelt beside the fallen navigation sphere. At her touch, it hummed to life once more. "Look," she breathed. The projection showed two worlds, Earth and Solaria, connected by lines of light. Between them loomed a darkness, vast and ancient. And at the heart of the image, a single word in both human and Solarian script. Awakening. Talon helped her to her feet, his touch lingering longer than necessary. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "we face it together." Astra nodded, knowing that everything had changed. The connection between their worlds wasn't just political anymore, it was written in the stars themselves, a destiny waiting to unfold. And as she looked into Talon's eyes, she realized their own connection might be just as inevitable. The artifacts had awakened, ancient prophecies stirred, and somewhere in the darkness between worlds, something else was awakening too. The real question was, would Earth and Solaria be ready when it arrived? Stellar convergence. The deep archives stretched endlessly beneath Celestial Prime, a labyrinth of crystalline chambers holding the oldest secrets of the Solarian Empire. Astra and Talon moved silently through the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing in the ancient silence. "These records predate the founding of the Empire," Talon whispered, his hand brushing against a wall of data crystals. "If there's any evidence of Earth and Solaria's shared past, it's here." Astra nodded, trying to ignore how her skin tingled whenever he came close. The events at the summit had changed everything, the failed attack, the awakening artifacts, the growing certainty that their people's destinies were intertwined. But it had also changed something between them, breaking down the careful walls of diplomacy they'd maintained. A soft glow caught her attention. She turned to find a massive crystal matrix, its surface etched with symbols she somehow recognized despite never having seen them before. As she approached, the matrix hummed to life, responding to her presence. "It's a star map," she breathed, watching as constellations bloomed in the air around them. "But these aren't current configurations. This is what the galaxy looked like thousands of years ago." Talon stepped closer, his warmth at her back sending shivers down her spine. "Look there," he pointed to a cluster of stars. "That's the Solarian home system. And beside it, Earth," Astra finished. "They're connected by some kind of energy pattern." The projection shifted, showing what looked like massive gates opening between the two systems. Ships passed through them, vessels that combined both human and Solarian design elements. Then darkness spread across the map, consuming stars, and the gates closed. "The Great Separation," a voice said from the shadows. They spun to find Sentinel Varix emerging from a hidden doorway. "I wondered when you would find this place." "You knew about this?" Talon demanded. "I am the keeper of records," Varix replied calmly. "I know many things. Including why the artifacts respond to Ambassador Novak." Astra's heart raced. "Tell us." "Before the separation, our peoples weren't just allies, they were one civilization. Humans and Solarians lived together, worked together, loved together. Their children carried the blood of both worlds." The implications hit Astra like a physical force. "You're saying I carry that ancient bloodline?" "Yes. Somewhere in your family tree, a human and Solarian union produced offspring. That's why you can interface with our technology, why the artifacts awaken at your touch. You are living proof that our peoples were meant to be united." A distant explosion rocked the archives. Alarms blared through the complex as emergency lights pulsed to life. "The purists," Talon growled. "They must have followed us." Varix moved quickly to a control panel. "The deep archives have their own defenses. I can seal the levels dash." Another explosion, closer this time. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. "Go," Varix commanded. Take the eastern passage. It leads to the surface. I'll hold them here. Sentinel - Astra started. The truth must survive, he cut her off. What you carry within you, it's more important than any single life. Go. Talon grabbed her hand and they ran, the sounds of battle fading behind them. The eastern passage twisted upward through layers of ancient rock, lit by strips of bioluminescent crystal. Their footsteps thundered against the metal grating of the floor. Wait, Astra pulled them to a stop. Listen. Voices ahead. They were being herded. This way, Talon pulled her into a side chamber. It was small, barely large enough for both of them. In the confined space, Astra was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of his breath against her hair. If they find us - she whispered. They won't. His arms tightened around her protectively. I won't let them. The voices grew closer. Astra held her breath, feeling Talon's heart racing against her back. In the darkness, surrounded by danger, all the unspoken things between them seemed to crystallize into something urgent and undeniable. She turned in his arms, meeting his golden eyes. For a moment, the footsteps and voices faded away. There was only this, the warmth of his skin, the intensity of his gaze, the magnetic pull drawing them closer. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like destiny itself. Thousands of years of separation dissolved in an instant of connection. She felt the ancient blood in her veins singing, recognizing something it had lost long ago. The moment shattered as weapons fire erupted outside their hiding place. They broke apart, reality crashing back. We have to move, Talon said, his voice rough. There's an emergency transport pad 2 levels up. If we can reach it - More explosions rocked the complex. Through gaps in the wall, they glimpsed figures in black combat gear moving with military precision. Ready? Talon drew his weapon. Astra nodded, her own training kicking in. Together. They burst from their hiding place, catching the first group of purists by surprise. Astra's combat skills combined with Talon's Royal Guard training made them a formidable team. They fought their way upward, level by level, covering each other's backs. The transport pad was ahead, its crystal surface gleaming. But as they approached, a massive figure stepped out to block their path. High Counselor Nexus, his elegant robes replaced by battle armor. I warned them, he said, raising a weapon. Humans would bring nothing but chaos to our empire. And now we find you've corrupted our very bloodlines. The only corruption, Astra replied steadily, is your fear of change. Our peoples were meant to be united, Talon added. The evidence is clear. Nexus laughed darkly. Evidence can be destroyed. Blood can be purged. The separation happened for a reason, and I will see it maintained. He fired. Talon shoved Astra aside, taking the blast across his shoulder. She rolled to her feet, fury burning through her veins. The ancient blood in her surged, and suddenly every piece of Solarian technology in the room responded to her will. Energy panels exploded. Shield generators overloaded. The very walls seemed to pulse with power. Nexus staggered as his own weapons turned against him. Impossible, he gasped. No, Astra helped Talon to his feet. Inevitable. The transport pad hummed to life behind them. As Nexus raised his weapon for another shot, they stepped onto the crystal surface. The last thing they saw was his face contorted with rage as energy enveloped them, carrying them to safety. They materialized in the palace's secure chambers, where loyal guards immediately surrounded them. Medical teams rushed to treat Talon's wound while security forces mobilized to deal with the purest threat. But even as chaos swirled around them, Astra and Talon's eyes met across the room. Something had awakened, in the artifacts, in their blood, in their hearts. The separation was ending, whether the galaxy was ready or not. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient force stirred, sensing that the time had finally come. The bridge between worlds. The throne room of Celestial Prime blazed with energy as ancient defense systems activated throughout the city. Through the crystalline windows, Astra watched as massive shields shimmered to life, protecting the floating spires from the darkness that crept across the golden sky. The sensors are detecting something massive emerging from hyperspace, reported Admiral Voss, her silver armor gleaming as she consulted a holographic display. Whatever drove our ancestors apart, it's returning. Astra stood beside Talon, their shoulders barely touching. His wound from the archives had healed, but the memory of his sacrifice lingered. Around them, the combined forces of Earth and Solaria prepared for what was coming. The attempted purist coup had been quelled, though Nexus and his core followers had escaped into deep space. The ancient records speak of a force that feeds on division, Talon said, addressing the gathered leaders. It drove our peoples apart because together, we were strong enough to resist it. And now it returns. Emperor Solus, Talon's father, rose from his throne. Just as our worlds begin to reunite. A tremor shook the palace. Outside, the darkness grew deeper, consuming the light of nearby stars. The sensors screamed as something massive emerged from the void, a ship, if it could be called that. Its surface seemed to absorb light and energy, its shape defying normal space. It's targeting the planetary shields, Admiral Voss announced. Our weapons have no effect. Astra stepped forward, feeling the ancient blood stirring in her veins. The artifacts. They weren't just recording our history, they were preserving the knowledge we'd need when this moment came. She reached for Talon's hand, and the connection between them flared like a newborn star. Through their joined touch, she felt the pulse of every piece of Solarian technology in the city. More than that, she felt the echoes of those who had come before, humans and Solarians who had faced this threat together. The gates, she breathed. The ancient gates that connected our worlds, we can reopen them. That kind of power would destabilize the entire defense grid, Admiral Voss protested. No, Talon squeezed Astra's hand. It would unite them. Earth's innovative defense systems with Solarian energy technology. Together, they're stronger. Emperor Solus studied them for a long moment, then nodded. Do it. Astra and Talon moved to the central control matrix, their hands hovering over the crystalline surface. As one, they reached out with their combined strength, Astra's human intuition and Talon's Solarian heritage creating something new. The matrix hummed to life, responding to their shared touch. Energy surged through the city's systems, and high above Celestial Prime, space itself began to fold. A massive gate took shape, its architecture both ancient and new, human and Solarian designs merging seamlessly. Through the gate, they glimpsed Earth's defense fleet waiting on the other side. The plan they'd set in motion days ago was ready, humanity's greatest ships, enhanced with Solarian technology, prepared to join the battle. The dark vessel attacked, tendrils of void energy lashing out at the planetary shields. But where they struck, they found not just Solarian defenses, but a hybrid network. Earth's adaptive shield harmonics merged with Solarian power distribution, creating something the ancient enemy had never encountered. All ships, engage. Admiral Voss commanded. The combined fleet struck from both sides of the gate, their weapons enhanced by the shared technology of two civilizations. Beams of pure energy sliced through the darkness, finding purchase where before there had been none. The void ship reeled, its surface rippling as it tried to adapt. But adaptation had always been humanity's strength, and the Solarians' mastery of energy gave those adaptations power. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. In the throne room, Astra and Talon maintained their connection to the city's systems. Through their joined consciousness, they felt the pulse of every weapon, every shield, every ship fighting above. Their shared blood sang with ancient power, bridging the gap between worlds that should never have been separated. Look, someone gasped. Through the windows, they watched as the void ship began to fracture. Light poured from its wounds, not the absorbed light of dead stars, but something new. Something born from the union of two peoples who had found each other again across time and space. The final blast, when it came, was spectacular. The combined fleet focused their fire through the gate itself, using its energy to amplify their weapons. The void ship shattered, its fragments dissolving into nothing as the golden sky of Celestial Prime cleared. In the aftermath, as cleanup crews began their work and diplomats drafted new treaties, Astra and Talon stood in the palace gardens where they'd first begun to fall in love. "The gates will remain open," Talon said softly. "Travel between Earth and Solaria will be easier than ever." "Good," Astra smiled. "Because I have no intention of choosing between worlds." He turned to her, his golden eyes bright with emotion. "The court will expect me to take a Solarian bride. To maintain the royal bloodline." "The royal bloodline already carries human DNA," she reminded him. "Or have you forgotten what we learned in the archives?" His smile was radiant as he pulled her close. "How could I forget? It led me to you." Their kiss was gentle, full of promise. Above them, ships from both worlds moved through the gate, their crews working together to rebuild what had been damaged. In the palace, humans and Solarians mingled freely, sharing stories and technologies. The separation was truly over. "So," Astra murmured against Talon's lips, "what happens now?" He smiled. "Now we build something new. Together." And in the golden city above the clouds, as two hearts beat in perfect harmony, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, celebrating the reunion of peoples who should never have been apart. The ancient prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. It wasn't just about preventing a catastrophe or defeating an enemy. It was about healing an ancient wound, about bringing together two halves of the same whole. As Astra and Talon walked through the gardens hand in hand, they knew their story would be told for generations to come. Not just as a tale of romance between worlds, but as a reminder that love, understanding, and unity were the greatest powers in the universe. The bridge between worlds had been rebuilt, stronger than ever before. And this time, it would endure.